At 38 years old, Dr. Grace Johnson had everything most people dreamed of. She was beautiful, intelligent, compassionate, and one of the most respected nurses in Nigeria. For nearly 20 years, she had dedicated her life to caring for others. While many people her age were busy raising families, Grace spent countless nights in hospital wards, comforting patients, saving lives, and building a career she could be proud of. Her hard work paid off. She owned a beautiful home, drove her own car, and had enough financial stability to support not only herself but also her parents whenever they needed help. Everyone admired her determination and discipline. Younger nurses looked up to her, and her colleagues respected her professionalism. Yet, despite all her accomplishments, there was one thing society refused to overlook. She was unmarried. Every Christmas, every wedding ceremony, every family reunion, and every birthday celebration became another opportunity for relatives to remind her of what they believed she was missing. Grace, you're not getting any younger. Who will take care of you when you're old? A successful woman still needs a husband. Some spoke with genuine concern, while others seemed to enjoy reminding her that she was approaching 40 without a husband. No matter how successful she became, people acted as though her achievements meant very little because she had not yet married. Grace rarely argued. She simply smiled and changed the subject. But whenever she returned home, she would sit quietly in her living room, wondering why her worth was measured by a wedding ring instead of the countless lives she had touched. Her parents loved her deeply, but even they worried. They longed to see their only daughter happily married and raising a family of her own. Although they never forced her into a relationship, Grace could feel the silent disappointment whenever another year passed without wedding plans. Her closest friends, however, encouraged her to stay patient. Don't marry because people are talking, her best friend Sarah Williams often reminded her. Marry because you found someone who truly deserves you. Grace agreed. She had turned down several wealthy men over the years because she sensed they admired her success more than they loved her as a person. She wasn't searching for a perfect man. She simply wanted someone kind, honest, hardworking, and faithful. Then, one ordinary Saturday changed everything. Grace volunteered at a free medical outreach organized by her hospital. While attending to patients, she met a cheerful young man named Michael Adams. Michael wasn't a doctor or a businessman. He worked a modest job and earned far less than Grace, but he carried himself with confidence, kindness, and respect. Unlike many men she had met before, Michael never seemed intimidated by her education or career. Instead, he admired her dedication and often encouraged her to continue pursuing her dreams. Their first conversation lasted only a few minutes, but something about him stayed in Grace's mind. A few days later, Michael called to thank her for the kindness she had shown during the outreach. That simple phone call became the beginning of many long conversations. They talked about life, family, faith, dreams, and the future. Weeks turned into months, and before long, they were spending more time together. For the first time in years, Grace allowed herself to believe that love had finally found her. When she introduced Michael to her closest friends, they welcomed him warmly. However, after he left, Sarah looked at Grace with concern. I like him, Sarah said gently, but please don't rush into marriage because everyone expects you to. Take your time. Make sure you truly know the man you are planning to spend the rest of your life with. Another friend, Rebecca Thompson, nodded in agreement. You've worked too hard to build this life. Just be certain he's marrying you for the right reasons. Grace appreciated the advice, but she believed love required trust. She didn't care that Michael earned less than she did. She believed that money could be earned, careers could grow, and together they could build a wonderful future. As their relationship deepened, Michael became everything Grace had hoped for. He was affectionate, attentive, and supportive. He listened whenever she talked about work, prayed with her, and made her laugh after stressful days at the hospital. Months later, Michael surprised Grace with a heartfelt proposal. With tears of joy in her eyes, she accepted. Their wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was beautiful. Family members celebrated, friends danced with excitement, and everyone congratulated Grace for finally finding the man they believed was meant for her. Even the relatives, who had spent years questioning her single status, now smiled proudly as they watched her walk down the aisle. Grace believed she was beginning the happiest chapter of her life. 6 months after their wedding, another incredible blessing arrived. Grace received an official job offer from a prestigious hospital in the United Kingdom. It was a dream opportunity with an excellent salary, better working conditions, and the chance to build an even brighter future. Without hesitation, she decided that she and Michael would begin this new journey together. She happily started the process of relocating both of them, believing that every sacrifice she made would strengthen their marriage and give them the life they had always dreamed of. Standing beside her husband at the airport, Grace looked into his eyes and smiled with hope. She believed they were leaving behind every struggle and stepping into a future filled with love, success, and endless possibilities. She had no idea that the greatest betrayal of her life had already begun to take shape. Moving to the United Kingdom felt like the beginning of a beautiful new chapter for Grace Johnson and her husband Michael Adams. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Grace quickly settled into her new role as a registered nurse at one of the country's respected hospitals. Although the job was demanding, she was grateful that years of hard work had finally opened the door to a better life. Michael, on the other hand, was still trying to find his footing. Since Grace's work schedule involved long shifts, they both agreed that he would stay home temporarily while looking for a suitable job. Grace never complained. She believed marriage was a partnership and she was willing to carry the family financially until Michael established himself. A year later, God blessed them with a beautiful baby boy. Holding her son for the first time filled Grace's heart with joy. She believed her family was finally complete. As her maternity leave came to an end, reality set in. Her 12-hour hospital shifts made it impossible to care for the baby and manage the house at the same time. Michael assured her that everything would be fine, but the daily responsibilities became overwhelming. After many discussions, Grace suggested hiring a living housekeeper to help with cooking, cleaning, and caring for the baby while both of them adjusted to life in the UK. Michael agreed without hesitation. Through a trusted agency, they hired a young woman named Emily. She was polite, hardworking, and gentle with the baby. Within weeks, the house became more organized, and Grace felt relieved. She finally believed she had found the balance between motherhood and her demanding career. Every morning, Grace left home before sunrise, kissing her husband and son goodbye before heading to the hospital. She trusted Michael completely. Never once did she imagine that the people she trusted most would become the source of her greatest pain. As the weeks passed, Emily and Michael spent more time together while Grace worked long hours. They laughed over breakfast, watched television while the baby slept, and gradually became more comfortable in each other's company. Grace noticed nothing unusual. Whenever she came home exhausted, the house was spotless, dinner was ready, and everyone acted as though life was perfect. One evening, Grace returned home earlier than expected after her shift was cancelled. As she quietly opened the front door, she immediately sensed something was different. The house was unusually silent. She called out for Michael. There was no answer. She called Emily's name. Still no answer. Her heart began to race as she slowly walked toward the master bedroom. Just as she reached the door, she heard voices from inside. What Grace saw next would shatter her marriage forever. To be continued, Grace Johnson stood frozen outside the bedroom door. Her heart pounded so loudly that it drowned out every other sound in the house. She had returned home earlier than expected after her shift was cancelled, hoping to surprise her family. Instead, she was the one about to receive the biggest shock of her life. Taking a deep breath, she slowly pushed the bedroom door open. There, standing together in the room, were her husband, Michael, and the housekeeper, Emily. They immediately stepped away from each other, their faces filled with panic. The silence that followed spoke louder than any explanation they could offer. Grace looked at Michael, waiting for him to deny what she had just seen. He couldn't. Tears filled her eyes as she asked the only question she could think of. Why? Michael lowered his head. Emily repeatedly apologized, saying she had made a terrible mistake and never intended to destroy a family. But Grace's pain was too deep to hear excuses. For years, she had worked tirelessly to build a better future for them. She had sponsored Michael's move to the United Kingdom, supported the family financially, worked exhausting shifts as a nurse, and trusted him completely. Now, that trust lay in pieces. Unable to stay in the same house, Grace packed a small bag for herself and her son and spent the night at a close friend's home. The next morning, she called her parents in Nigeria, hoping they would comfort her and help her decide what to do next. Instead, they pleaded with her to forgive Michael. Every marriage has challenges, her mother said softly. Think about your son before making any decision. Her father added, don't let one mistake destroy your home. Their words broke her heart even more. She then contacted Michael's parents, believing they would at least hold their son accountable. To her surprise, they blamed her instead. You work too much, his mother said. If you stayed home more often, your husband wouldn't have looked elsewhere. Another family member even reminded Grace that Michael had married her, despite the pressure society had placed on her because of her age. Grace sat silently with the phone in her hand, unable to believe what she was hearing. The people she expected to defend her were asking her to carry the burden alone. For several weeks, she tried to save the marriage. She suggested counseling, honest conversations, and rebuilding trust. Michael apologized repeatedly and promised never to betray her again. But something inside Grace had changed. Every time she looked at him, she remembered the pain of that day. The trust she had once given so freely was gone. One evening, after putting her son to bed, Grace sat alone in the living room. She thought about everything she had sacrificed, her time, her career, her peace of mind, and the dreams she had carried into the marriage. For the first time, she asked herself a question she had been avoiding. Am I staying because this marriage is healthy or because everyone else expects me to? The answer became clear. Grace knew she deserved a life built on respect, honesty, and peace. With quiet determination, she made the hardest decision of her life. She would file for divorce. She didn't know what the future would look like, but she knew she could no longer live in a marriage where trust had been broken. Little did she know that this decision would not only change her own life, but Michael's life as well. Grace Johnson never imagined that signing divorce papers would be one of the hardest moments of her life. She had prayed, forgiven, waited, and fought to save her marriage. She had done everything she believed a wife should do, but she finally realized that love cannot survive where trust no longer exists. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. Although she felt heartbroken, Grace also felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: peace. She no longer woke up wondering whether she was enough. She no longer questioned her worth or blamed herself for someone else's choices. Instead of dwelling on the past, Grace poured all her energy into raising her son Noah and excelling in her nursing career. Day by day, she became stronger. Her colleagues admired her resilience, and her patients continued to appreciate her kindness and compassion. Meanwhile, Michael's life took a different direction. Without Grace's financial support and stability, life became much more difficult. The marriage he had taken for granted was gone, And so was the future he had imagined. He was left to reflect on the consequences of his own decisions. Grace never celebrated his struggles. She simply chose to move forward. Nearly 2 years passed. One afternoon, while volunteering at a charity fundraising event organized by the hospital, Grace met a man named David Wilson. He was kind, respectful, patient, and treated everyone around him with genuine dignity. Unlike others, David never judged Grace because she was divorced. He admired her strength, her dedication as a mother, and the compassion she showed to everyone she met. Their friendship grew naturally. It took time to know Noah, and Noah quickly became comfortable around him. Grace watched carefully, refusing to rush into another relationship. She had learned from her past and wanted to build a future based on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. After many months of friendship, David asked Grace to marry him. This time, her answer wasn't based on pressure from society or fear of being alone. It was based on peace. She said yes. Their wedding was simple, joyful, and filled with people who genuinely wished them well. As Grace looked at David and Noah standing beside her, she realized that happiness doesn't come from pleasing everyone around you. It comes from making decisions that protect your peace and your dignity. Years later, Grace often shared one lesson with younger women she mentored. Never believe you have to remain where you are constantly disrespected just to satisfy other people's expectations. A healthy marriage is built on love, honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect. She didn't hate Michael. She forgave him not because he deserved it, but because she deserved to live without bitterness. Grace had finally found what she had been searching for all along, not just marriage, but peace.